My mom was a working mom. She went to, I was born 6 weeks before a big show called I Love Lucy went on the air.
Lucille Ball wasn't just America's favorite redhead. She was a savvy businesswoman who built an empire behind the laughs. She also made history as the first woman to run a major Hollywood studio. But what many don't realize is just how massive her fortune became. When she passed away, Ball didn't just leave behind a legacy of comedy. She left her family fabulously wealthy. From smart investments to groundbreaking deals, her empire kept growing. Let's take a closer look at how Ball's brilliance off-screen turned into serious riches for generations and for her family. Big name, big sum. Lucille Ball may have passed away in 1989, but her wealth and financial legacy are still impressive and fascinating to explore. At the height of her career, she was one of the richest and most powerful women in Hollywood, an especially rare feat during a time when the entertainment industry was overwhelmingly male-dominated. Most people remember her for her legendary role in I Love Lucy, but her fortune came from more than just being funny on screen. She was a smart businesswoman who made bold moves behind the scenes, and that's really where her financial story takes off. One of the biggest turning points in Lucille Ball's financial journey was when she and her then-husband, Desi Arnaz, co-founded Desilu Productions. This wasn't just a vanity project, it became a real powerhouse in the television world. Desilu wasn't just responsible for I Love Lucy, but also for greenlighting and producing other major hits like Star Trek and The Untouchables. That kind of control and ownership meant Ball wasn't just collecting a paycheck, she was building equity in her own company, which grew to be one of the largest independent TV production studios in the country. When she eventually bought out Desi's share in the company after their divorce, she became the first woman to run a major Hollywood studio, which gave her even more financial control and success. In 1967, she sold Desilu to Gulf and Western for about $17 million, which would be worth over $150 million in today's dollars when adjusted for inflation. That deal not only set her up with a huge personal fortune, but also cemented her legacy as a major player in the entertainment industry. Even after selling Desilu, she continued acting and producing, which helped her maintain a strong income. She also earned royalties and licensing fees from the ongoing success of I Love Lucy, which has been in syndication for decades. That show never really stopped making money, and because she had partial ownership rights, it continued to generate income for her estate long after her death. At the time of her death, Ball's net worth was estimated to be around $40 million, which would be roughly equivalent to over $100 million today. Her estate continued to earn revenue thanks to syndication, licensing, and merchandise related to her shows. In fact, her legacy is so strong that her name, image, and body of work still bring in money. Museums, memorabilia, streaming services, and even modern documentaries about her life and work contribute to her lasting financial impact. She wasn't just a beloved TV icon, she was a serious business force, and of course, a huge financial support to her children. How much did the kids make? Let's find out. Generational wealth. Most of that wealth went to her two children, Lucy Arnaz and Desi Arnaz Jr. They both followed in their parents' footsteps to some degree, working in the entertainment industry themselves, but they didn't have to worry too much about money thanks to what Lucille left behind. She made sure her estate was solidly managed, and her children got both the money and the rights to her legacy, including royalties, production rights, and stakes in classic TV shows that are still watched and loved. Lucy Arnaz is still active in the entertainment industry, though she's done it her own way. She's been an actress, producer, and a pretty vocal advocate for preserving her mother's memory. You'll find her popping up in documentaries or interviews anytime there's a retrospective on classic Hollywood, particularly if it involves her mom and dad. She's got that combination of groundedness and glamour, you know, the kind of person who probably owns a farm somewhere quiet, but still shows up in New York for Broadway openings. Thanks to Lucille's success, Lucy's never really had to fight for survival in the cutthroat world of showbiz. She's been able to pick and choose what projects matter to her. Desi Arnaz Jr., born just a couple years after Lucy in 1953, had his own turn in the spotlight. He was a musician and actor in his younger years, though he's mostly stepped out of the limelight now. He's been a little more low-key than Lucy, living a quieter life, especially in recent years. He went through his share of ups and downs in the public eye. But again, the cushion of his parents' wealth allowed him to live life on his own terms. That's the kind of privilege that doesn't just come from money. It comes from a legacy strong enough to protect and sustain a family long after the cameras stop rolling. Financially, both Lucy and Desi Jr. have been more than comfortable. When Lucille passed away, her estate and a massive sum back then that's only grown thanks to syndication, merchandising, and the enduring power of nostalgia. That wealth didn't just vanish. It translated into real generational security. Houses, education, opportunities, all those things people scramble for, already there for them. They were essentially born into a brand that continues to pay dividends. And it's not just about the money, it's also about the emotional and cultural capital they carry. Being Ball's children gives them a sort of honorary status in the entertainment world, even now. Of course, not everything has been rosy. There have been some complications along the way, especially after Lucille's second husband, Gary Morton, passed away. His widow, Susie McAllister, ended up selling off some of Lucille's personal items, which did not sit well with the family. Lucy and her children actually tried to intervene legally, hoping to preserve those personal effects, not because they were worth a fortune, although they probably were, but because they were pieces of family history. It's one of those classic situations. Even with all the money in the world, emotions and legacy still get messy. People forget that heirs of famous people are still just families trying to hang on to what matters to them. Despite those hiccups, the overall picture is still one of comfort and stability. Lucille Ball didn't just leave behind a show or even a collection of shows, she left behind a life raft for her family. A massive one. Lucy and Desi Jr. have managed to honor her legacy while also living their own lives, which is no easy feat when your mother is a literal television icon. They've been able to do so not out of desperation or the need to hustle every day, but from a place of security and deep personal pride. It's not just about the cash, though. Lucille also left behind something arguably more valuable: the power of her name. Her estate continues to make money today through licensing deals, reruns, and merchandise. That's all carefully handled by her family, especially Lucy, who has been very involved in protecting and promoting her mother's legacy. So in a way, the fortune Lucille passed down wasn't just dollars, it was also cultural and emotional value that her family still carries and builds on. There were also physical properties and personal items included in her estate. Lucille owned homes, art, jewelry, and other valuables that went to her kids. But she was also generous in spirit, known for helping out friends and even giving to charity. Her will was detailed and thoughtful, making sure her loved ones were taken care of, but also making clear what really mattered to her. Her wealth didn't just come from acting. It came from smart decisions, bold risks, and being ahead of her time in knowing how to own and control the content she helped create. That's a big reason why she's still admired today, not just for making people laugh, but for showing that women could lead, innovate, and build real wealth in Hollywood. Speaking of career, Lucille was a staple name back in her time, a beautiful female comedian. She wasn't just a funny woman on screen, she was a true pioneer in entertainment, especially during a time when Hollywood was still very much a man's world. Her career is long, fascinating, and filled with groundbreaking moments. But the true peak of her popularity, the time when Lucille Ball was absolutely everywhere, definitely centers around her iconic show, I Love Lucy. Still, her journey to that point and what came after tells an incredible story of talent, persistence, and a whole lot of laughter. Lucille Ball didn't start out as a superstar. In fact, her early career was pretty rocky. She began as a model in the 30s and then transitioned into film, mostly working in B-movies. For a long time, she was known as the Queen of the B's because she appeared in so many low-budget films. She wasn't taken very seriously by critics, and it looked like she might never break out of that second-tier status. But Lucille was determined, and she worked constantly, racking up roles and getting better with each one. In the 40s, she started working more in radio, and that's actually where the seed for her biggest success was planted. She starred in a radio show called My Favorite Husband, and it was pretty popular. CBS loved it and wanted to bring it to TV. Lucille agreed, but only if her real-life husband, Desi Arnaz, could play her husband on screen too. That's how I Love Lucy was born, and honestly, that's where everything changed for her. When I Love Lucy premiered in 1951, it was an instant hit. Lucille Ball wasn't just funny, she was fearless. The physical comedy she did was totally original for a woman on TV at the time. Whether she was stuffing chocolates in her mouth on a factory line or stomping grapes in Italy, Lucille gave it her all. She was willing to look silly, to fall, to fail, and to get back up again, all for the laugh. Audiences had never seen anything quite like her. She was relatable, charming, and hilarious. People just couldn't get enough of Lucy Ricardo. The show quickly became a cultural phenomenon. By its second season, I Love Lucy was the most watched show in America. At its peak, over 60% of households with a television were tuning in to watch Lucille Ball every week. That's just mind-blowing when you think about it. She wasn't just a star, she was the star. She and Desi Arnaz also revolutionized the way TV was made. They filmed I Love Lucy in front of a live audience using multiple cameras, which is now the standard format for sitcoms. And they owned the rights to the show through their company, Desilu Productions, which made Lucille not only a huge talent, but also a major power player behind the scenes. Even after the end of I Love Lucy, she continued to shape what people were watching on TV. She starred in several other shows after I Love Lucy, including The Lucy Show and Here's Lucy, both of which were successful, though they never quite reached the same legendary status as the original. Still, Lucille Ball remained a beloved figure for decades. Even in reruns, I Love Lucy kept winning new fans. The show has never really gone off the air, and it still makes people laugh today. The real peak of Lucille Ball's popularity was in the 50s, during the original run of I Love Lucy. That was when she was the face of American comedy, and her influence was at its strongest. But honestly, her impact lasted far beyond that. She broke barriers for women in entertainment, she helped invent the sitcom format we still use today, and she proved that comedy could be both silly and smart. Her timing was perfect, her expressions were unforgettable, and her legacy is massive, beyond top shows. Under her leadership, Desilu greenlit some of the most influential TV shows of all time, including Star Trek, Mission Impossible, and The Untouchables. Think about that for a second. Star Trek might not have existed if it weren't for Lucille Ball. She wasn't just a performer, she was a visionary who saw potential in ideas others passed on. That alone makes her an icon beyond comedy. Outside of her TV empire, Lucille had a long and varied film career. Before she became America's favorite redhead, she worked in Hollywood during the 30s and 40s, mostly in B-movies, where she was often called the Queen of the B's. But she held her own alongside big stars in films like Stage Door with Katharine Hepburn and Ginger Rogers, and The Big Street with Henry Fonda. Her work in films might not have brought her the same level of fame as her TV roles, but it definitely showed her range and resilience in an industry that often overlooked comedic women. Lucille was also the recipient of countless honors throughout her life, and even after her passing. She was the first woman to receive the International Radio and Television Society's Gold Medal in 1971. In 1989, she was posthumously awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom, one of the highest civilian honors in the United States. And she has not one, but 2 stars on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, one for television and one for motion pictures. On top of that, the Television Academy honored her with several Emmys over her career, including a posthumous Governor's Award in 1989 for her lasting contribution to the medium. What's more, Lucille Ball wasn't just about business and awards. She deeply influenced comedy itself. Her physical comedy, timing, and ability to turn the smallest situations into full-blown comic chaos laid the foundation for generations of comedians. People like Carol Burnett, Lily Tomlin, and even modern comics like Tina Fey and Amy Poehler cite her as a direct influence. She made it okay for women to be funny, loud, clumsy, and completely in charge of the joke. Even in her later years, Lucille didn't slow down. She took on a more dramatic role in the 1985 TV movie Stone Pillow, playing a homeless woman, a big departure from her usual funny roles. The project proved she could handle drama just as well as comedy, and it earned her critical praise. She also made appearances in specials and award shows, always reminding people she was still a force, even if she wasn't front and center in a weekly sitcom. Ball was so much more than Lucy Ricardo. She was a pioneer, a powerhouse, and a one-of-a-kind talent. Whether she was running a studio, producing hit shows, cracking up audiences on screen, or changing the game behind the scenes, she always brought her A-game. Her contributions didn't just entertain. They reshaped the industry and opened doors for so many others. That's why her legacy still shines just as brightly decades after her last performance. But of course, while she became an icon of comedy and a pioneer in television, her path to success was anything but smooth. She was tested, like other big stars along their journey. Career blocks and challenges. In fact, Lucille faced plenty of rejection, criticism, and even a few tough moments where it seemed like her career might completely stall. Behind the big laughs and red hair was a woman constantly battling for recognition in a male-dominated industry. Lucille's early years in Hollywood weren't exactly glamorous. In the 1930s and early 40s, she mostly got B-movie roles, often labeled a Queen of the B's, because she never seemed to land that one big breakout part. Producers liked her, but didn't quite know what to do with her. She was pretty, but not in that classic leading lady way that studios wanted. Her comedic talent, which would later become her trademark, was initially seen as a liability. Back then, many thought women weren't supposed to be loud, clumsy, or funny in a big way, especially not in front of an audience. Lucille defied all of that, but it took a long time for Hollywood to catch up. Despite all this success, Lucille constantly faced criticism. Some people thought her brand of comedy was too physical or silly. Others couldn't handle the idea of a woman being in charge. Even her personal life was always under a microscope, especially her marriage to Desi, which eventually fell apart in a very public way. After I Love Lucy ended, Lucille's career didn't exactly disappear, but it definitely hit some bumps. She tried to recreate the magic with follow-up shows like The Lucy Show and Here's Lucy, but none reached the same level of cultural impact. By the late 70s and early 80s, the world of TV had shifted. Comedy styles had evolved, and Lucille's old-school humor started to feel outdated to younger audiences. Her 1986 comeback attempt with Life with Lucy was a major flop. It was canceled after just a few episodes, and critics weren't kind. It was a tough blow for someone who had once dominated the airwaves. It showed how even legends can struggle with staying relevant in a fast-changing industry. Personal life. Lucille Ball met Desi Arnaz, a charismatic Cuban band leader, in 1940 while they were filming Too Many Girls. Sparks flew quickly, and after a whirlwind romance, they eloped in November at the Byram River Beagle Club in Greenwich, Connecticut. That same night, Desi had 2 shows scheduled at the Roxy Theater in New York City. He ended up missing the first performance, but managed to get back in time for the second one. The following year, Lucille and Desi bought a 5-acre ranch in the San Fernando Valley neighborhood of Chatsworth, California, which they affectionately named Desilu, a blend of their names. During the filming of Valley of the Sun, Lucille became pregnant, but sadly, she miscarried in 1942. Desi was drafted into the military in 1943, but because of a previous knee injury, he was classified for limited service. He stayed in Los Angeles and was assigned to work as an instructor at a special training camp. While there, he entertained the troops, essentially using his talents to boost morale rather than serve on the front lines. The next year, Lucille filed for divorce due to Desi's heavy drinking and repeated affairs. She even received an initial divorce decree, but before things became final, the couple reconciled and decided to stay together. Over the next few years, Lucille experienced several more miscarriages, but finally, just weeks before her 40th birthday, she gave birth to their daughter, Lucy Arnaz, in 1951. A little over a year later, their son, Desiderio Alberto Arnaz IV, better known as Desi Arnaz Jr., was born. At the time, I Love Lucy was already a huge success, and they made TV history by writing Lucille's real-life pregnancy into the show's storyline. Her C-section was carefully scheduled to align with the air date of the episode where Lucy Ricardo also gave birth. At first, CBS had major concerns about showing a pregnant woman on television. They wouldn't even allow the word pregnant to be said on air. It took the approval of religious advisors for the network to finally greenlight the storyline, but they insisted on using the word expecting instead. Desi turned that into a punchline by deliberately mispronouncing it as spectin. The episode was officially titled Lucy is enceinte, borrowing the French word for pregnant, though titles never actually appeared during broadcasts. The episode aired, and an astonishing 44 million viewers tuned in to watch Lucy give birth to little Ricky. On that very same day, in real life, Lucille gave birth to Desi Jr. in a Los Angeles hospital. The moment was so iconic, it landed on the cover of the very first issue of TV Guide, published for the week of April 3rd to 9th, 1953. In October 1956, Lucille Ball, Desi Arnaz, Vivian Vance, and William Frawley all appeared together on a Bob Hope special airing on NBC. They even did a funny I Love Lucy spoof, which was notable because it was the only time all four of them appeared together in a color broadcast. By the late 50s, their production company, Desilu, had grown into a major enterprise. While it was successful, managing such a large company brought a lot of stress for both Lucille and Desi. Then, just a day after Desi's 43rd birthday, and right after they filmed the last episode of the Lucy Desi Comedy Hour, Lucille officially filed for divorce in Santa Monica. She described married life with Desi as a nightmare, quite different from the happy image everyone saw on I Love Lucy. The divorce was finalized on May 4, 1960. Despite the breakup, Lucille and Desi stayed friends for the rest of his life, often speaking warmly about one another. Interestingly, her real-life divorce influenced her later TV roles, where she usually played single women, often widows. The following year, Lucille took on the lead role in the Broadway musical Wildcat, where she worked alongside Keith Andes and Paula Stewart. This show sparked a long-lasting friendship with Stewart, who eventually introduced Lucille to her second husband, Gary Morton. Morton was a comedian from the Borscht Belt circuit and was 13 years younger than Lucille. They got married on November 19, 1961. Gary hadn't actually seen an episode of I Love Lucy before meeting her because of his busy schedule, but Lucille quickly brought him into her production company, taught him the ropes of TV production, and later promoted him to producer. He also made occasional cameo appearances in her shows. The couple maintained homes in Beverly Hills, Palm Springs, and Snowmass Village, Colorado. Lucille was clearly happy with her choice of partner. In 1983, she wrote to a friend, "Boy, did I pick a winner. After 19 years with that Latin lover, I never expected to marry again, but I'm glad I did." She was also famously vocal about her feelings regarding her son Desi Jr.'s relationships. She didn't approve of his romance with actress Patty Duke, and when he dated Liza Minnelli, Lucille commented, "I miss Liza, but you cannot domesticate Liza." Life and death. Lucille was born in Jamestown, New York. She was the firstborn and only daughter of Henry Durrell Had Ball, who worked as a lineman for Bell Telephone, and Desiree Evelyn Dee Ball. The family were members of the Baptist Church. Lucille's ancestry was primarily English, with some Scottish, French, and Irish roots. A few of her ancestors were among the earliest settlers in colonial America, including Elder John Crandall of Rhode Island and Edmund Rice, who emigrated to the Massachusetts Bay Colony from England. Because of her father's job with Bell Telephone, the family moved frequently during Lucy's early years, first to Anaconda, Montana, then to Trenton, New Jersey. Tragically, while the family was living in Wyandotte, Michigan, her father passed away from typhoid fever on February 28, 1915, when Lucy was just 3 years old. At the time, her mother was expecting a second child, Fred Ball, who was born later that year. Lucille later recalled very little from the day her father died, except a vivid memory of a bird flying into their home, an incident that sparked her lifelong fear of birds. Following her husband's death, Dee moved the family back to New York, where Lucille and her brother Fred were raised with help from their maternal grandparents in the village of Celeron, a lakeside summer resort near Chautauqua Lake. They lived at 59 West 8th Street, which would eventually be renamed Lucy Lane. Also living in the house were Lucy's aunt and uncle, Lola and George Mandikos, along with their daughter, Cleo, Lucille's cousin and childhood companion. Cleo would later work as a producer on many of Lucille's radio and TV shows, and Lucille introduced her to her second husband, critic Cecil Smith of the Los Angeles Times. Lucy had a deep affection for Celeron Park, a bustling local amusement park with attractions like a boardwalk slide into the lake, a roller coaster, a ballroom, and a stage for vaudeville acts. These childhood experiences clearly helped shape her early interest in show business. 4 years after the death of her father, Didi remarried Edward Peterson. While Didi and her new husband looked for work in another town, Lucy and Fred were left in the care of Peterson's parents. These step-grandparents were strict Swedish Puritans who removed all mirrors from the house except for one in the bathroom. Lucy was once scolded harshly for admiring her reflection, an event she later said had a lasting impact on her, especially during the 7 or 8 years she lived with them. At the age of 12, Lucy's stepfather encouraged her to audition for a Shriners show that needed performers. The experience of being on stage made a strong impression. She discovered that performing earned her the praise and attention she longed for. In 1927, hardship struck again when her family had to move into a modest apartment in Jamestown after their home and belongings were sold to cover a legal settlement. Despite these early struggles, Lucille's love for the stage had already taken root, setting the foundation for a legendary career. On April 18, 1989, Lucille Ball was admitted to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles after experiencing chest pains. Doctors diagnosed her with a dissecting aortic aneurysm near her heart. She underwent a lengthy 7-hour operation to repair the damage and received an aortic valve replacement, which was initially deemed successful. However, on the morning of Wednesday, April 26th, while still recovering in the hospital, Ball awoke with intense back pain. Shortly after, she lost consciousness and passed away at 5:47 in the morning. Medical staff later determined that the cause of death was a ruptured abdominal aortic aneurysm, which was unrelated to the section of the aorta repaired during her earlier surgery. Following her death, 3 separate memorial services were held in her honor. Lucille was cremated, and her ashes were initially placed at Forest Lawn, Hollywood Hills Cemetery in Los Angeles, where her mother had also been laid to rest. In 2002, honoring Lucille's wish to be buried near her mother, both her and her mother's remains were moved to the Hunt family plot at Lakeview Cemetery in her hometown of Jamestown. Her brother, Fred Henry Ball's remains were also interred there. You reached the end of the video. Subscribe to the channel for more uploads. Thanks for watching.